General Latoya Freeman sat rigid in a grimy Texas jail cell, wrists chafed raw from tight cuffs, her spotless uniform streaked with dust. Officer Dwayne Carver grinned outside, twirling her 3-star pins like cheap trinkets, convinced he'd broken her. She'd been driving home just another night, until he pounced. Now silent, her gaze cut through the bars, plotting. One call could flip this nightmare, and his life would never recover. What happens when power crumbles? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's explosive episode is one you can't miss. General Latoya Freeman gripped the steering wheel of her black Ford Expedition, her knuckles taut against the leather as she cruised down a desolate stretch of Highway 190 in rural Texas. The night was thick, the kind of dark that swallowed headlights whole, leaving only the faint glow of her dashboard to cut through it. She'd just left Fort Hood after a grueling 12-hour briefing on troop deployments, her mind still buzzing with logistics and coordinates. Her military-grade GPS flickered, struggling to map a shortcut through the tangle of unpaved roads, snaking around the base. She squinted at the screen, tapping it once with a calloused finger, willing it to stabilize. 30 miles from home, she could taste the promise of her sister's cooking, a rare night off ahead. Then, out of nowhere, red and blue lights erupted in her rearview mirror, slicing the quiet like a blade. Her stomach didn't drop, not yet, but a familiar weight settled in her chest, the kind she'd carried since childhood in Baton Rouge, when her father taught her how to survive a world that saw her skin before her soul. She eased the SUV onto the gravel shoulder, tires crunching, and killed the engine. The silence roared louder than the sirens. She adjusted her posture, shoulders squared, hands resting at 10 and 2, her 3-star pins glinting faintly on her uniform collar under. The dim interior light. The rear view showed a figure approaching, broad and swaggering, his flashlight beam jerking wildly like he was hunting prey. Latoya lowered her window with a slow, deliberate press of the button, the humid Texas air rushing in, thick with the scent of dry grass and gasoline. The cop stopped a foot from her door, his beam stabbing into her eyes, forcing her to blink against the glare. Officer Dwayne Carver, his name tag read, though she didn't need it to clock the type. Buzz-cut blonde hair, jaw clenched like he chewed nails for breakfast, and pale blue eyes that narrowed as they raked over her. His uniform strained at the buttons, sweat stains blooming under his arms despite the cool night. He planted both hands on his belt, one thumb brushing the holstered Glock, and barked, "License and registration, now." His voice carried an edge, sharp and unearned, the kind meant to rattle civilians. Latoya didn't flinch. She'd stared down Taliban snipers in Kandahar, negotiated with Russian generals over vodka in freezing bunkers, and briefed presidents without breaking a sweat. This was nothing. "They're in the glove box," she said, her tone flat, measured, the way she'd trained herself to speak when the stakes were uneven. She reached across the passenger seat, slow as molasses, her movements telegraphed so he couldn't claim she lunged. The glove compartment clicked open, revealing a neat stack of papers and her wallet. She pulled out her driver's license and military ID, the latter embossed with her rank and serial number, a shield she'd earned through blood and grit. She handed them over, her fingers steady, nails clipped short from years of field work. "Here you go, Officer Carver." He snatched the cards without a word, holding them up to his flashlight like he was inspecting counterfeit bills. His lips curled as he scanned her license first, then flicked to the military ID. His eyes lingered on the words, "General Latoya Freeman, U.S. Army," but the sneer didn't fade. "This supposed to impress me," he said, tossing the ID back through the window. It landed on her lap, a deliberate slight. "Looks fake. You people always got some story." The "you people" hung in the air, heavy as a brick, and Latoya's jaw tightened, though her face stayed stone. She'd heard it before, from drill sergeants who doubted her, from colonels who smirked at her promotions, from strangers who assumed she'd stolen the stars on her shoulders. She tapped her fingers lightly on the wheel, an old habit to keep, her pulse even, and said, "It's real, I'm stationed at Fort Hood, just heading home." Carver didn't buy it, or didn't want to. He stepped back, hand still hovering near his gun, and tilted his head like he was sizing up a stray dog. "What's a general doing out here alone, huh? Lost in my town. Step out of the vehicle." His tone wasn't a request, it was a dare, laced with the assumption she'd bolt or fight. LaToya unbuckled her seatbelt, the click loud in the stillness, and opened the door with the same calm she'd used to disarm IEDs in Iraq. She stood, all 5'9" of her, uniform crisp despite the long day, her combat boots sinking slightly into the gravel. The stars on her collar caught the flashlight's beam, but Carver's gaze locked on her skin, not her rank. He circled, her like a vulture, his boots scuffing the dirt, his breath sour with coffee and spite. "Hands where I can see 'em," he snapped, though they already were, resting loose at her sides. She lifted them slightly, palms open, and met his stare. "I was adjusting my GPS," she said, nodding toward the dashboard. "Pulled over to fix it. That's not illegal." He didn't even glance at the screen, just kept his eyes on her, searching for a twitch, a flinch, anything to justify what he'd already decided. "Don't tell me what's legal, girl," he spat, the word dripping with venom. "I say what goes around here." Her pulse ticked up, but she swallowed it down, years of discipline keeping her steady. She'd faced worse than this clown, but the math was off. A lone cop, a quiet road, no witnesses. Or so he thought. Across the highway, a beat-up semi rumbled to a stop, its driver a grizzled man with a grey beard, squinting through his windshield. He fumbled with his phone, the screen glowing as he angled it toward them, recording silently. LaToya clocked it from the corner of her eye, but Carver didn't notice, too busy puffing his chest. "Turn around," he ordered, pulling cuffs from his belt, the metal glinting under his flashlight. LaToya's brow furrowed, just a flicker, but she complied, pivoting slow and smooth, her boots grinding the gravel. "I'm not under arrest," she said, voice still level, testing him. "You're whatever I say you are," he shot back, stepping closer. Before she could counter, he grabbed her wrist, wrenching it behind her back with a twist that burned her tendons. She bit down a grunt, refusing him the satisfaction as he slapped the first cuff on, then the second, yanking them tight until they bit into her skin. "Resisting an officer," he muttered, loud enough for his body cam to catch, though she hadn't moved an inch. He shoved her forward, her chest slamming into the hood of her Expedition, the warm metal creaking under her weight, her cheek pressed against it, dust smearing her face, but her eyes stayed open, sharp, counting every second. Carver towered over her, one hand pinning her shoulder, the other fumbling with his radio. "Got a live one," he said into it, smirking, his thumb still tapping the holster like he hoped she'd give him an excuse. LaToya's mind raced, not with fear, but with strategy. She'd survived ambushes in Fallujah, outsmarted warlords, in Syria, and this was just another battlefield, smaller but no less vicious. The trucker's phone kept rolling, its tiny light a lifeline she couldn't reach yet. Carver yanked her upright, her wrists throbbing, and marched her toward his cruiser, its lights still flashing like a cheap carnival show. "You're done," he said, shoving her against the door, his breath hot on her neck. "Should have stayed where you belong." She didn't answer, didn't need to. Her silence was a weapon, and she'd wield it until the right moment. The highway stretched empty ahead, but the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm she'd summon herself. LaToya Freeman's boots scraped the chipped concrete as Officer Dwayne Carver hauled her through the back entrance of the Killeen County Sheriff's Station, his meaty fingers digging into her bicep like he was wrangling livestock. The cuffs bit deeper into her wrists, her uniform sleeves bunching under the strain, but she kept her spine straight, her face a mask of granite. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind them, echoing down a dim hallway that reeked of bleach and stale sweat. Carver shoved her forward, his breath puffing in short, smug bursts, and she stumbled just enough to catch the jeers of a half-dozen deputies lounging against the walls. "Look what Carver dragged in," one snorted, a lanky guy with a buzz, cut and a toothpick dangling from his lip. "Another one who don't know her place," a second chimed in, his voice low and oily, eyes raking over her like she was meat on a hook. The slurs came next, whispered but sharp, slicing through the air. Uppity, thug. Words LaToya had heard since she was a girl, dodging rocks on her way to school. She locked her jaw, counting their faces, filing them away for later. Carver strutted ahead, his boots clomping, and swung open a cell door with a clang that rattled her teeth. The space was a coffin of grime, 6 by 8 feet, with a rusted cot bolted to the wall and a toilet that stank of neglect. Graffiti scarred the cinder blocks, jagged letters spelling out hate she'd seen scrawled on bunkers in war zones. He pushed her inside, her shoulder banging the frame, and she caught herself before she hit the floor. "Welcome home, Princess," he sneered, tossing her military ID into a drawer on his desk across the hall like it was trash. The laminated card skidded, landing face up, her name and rank staring back at her through the bars. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his gut spilling over his belt. "You'll learn real quick who runs things here. Ain't no fancy title gonna save you." His lips curled into a grin, yellow teeth flashing, and she wondered how. A man so small inside could puff himself up so big. LaToya stood still, her boots planted firm, letting the silence stretch. She'd faced worse than this, far worse. She remembered Fallujah, the crack of sniper fire pinning her squad in a crumbling alley, her voice steady as she called the shots that got them out alive. She remembered Kabul, a bomb ripping through. Her convoy, her hands slick with a private's blood as she dragged him to safety. This was a tantrum in uniform, not a war. "I need a phone call," she said, her voice cutting through his gloating like a knife through fat. Carver barked a laugh, loud and hollow, bouncing off the walls. "Phone call, you don't get shit till I say so." He turned, slamming the cell door shut, the lock clicking with a finality that might have rattled someone else. But LaToya's eyes were already scanning, sharp and restless, taking in every inch of her cage. The deputies drifted off, their chuckles fading down the hall, leaving Carver alone with his prize. He paced outside her cell, boots tapping a rhythm of petty triumph, muttering about teaching her a lesson. She ignored him, her mind replaying decades of combat, of outsmarting enemies who underestimated her. This wasn't new, just uglier, up close. Her gaze snagged on a rusty payphone mounted to the wall across from her cell 10 feet away, its cord dangling like a lifeline. It was old, probably broken, but it was there, unguarded, a crack in Carver's smug fortress. She slid a hand to her hair, fingers brushing the tight bun she'd worn since basic training, and felt the thin metal of a hairpin tucked inside. Her pulse ticked up, not from fear, but from possibility. She'd picked locks before, on missions where silence meant survival, and this one looked flimsy, rusted from years of damp neglect. Carver turned his back, rummaging through his desk, cursing as he shuffled papers to justify his bullshit stop. LaToya moved fast, sliding the pin free with a flick of her thumb, her hand still cuffed, but nimble. From years of practice. She knelt by the cell door, keeping him in her peripheral vision, and worked the pin into the lock, feeling the tumblers shift. Her wrists ached, the cuffs rubbing her skin raw, but she tuned it out, her focus laser tight. What kind of man locks up a general for adjusting a GPS? She thought, twisting the pin. What kind of system lets him strut while she bleeds? The lock clicked, soft and sweet, and she froze, waiting for Carver to spin around. He didn't, too, busy scribbling lies on a clipboard, his pen scratching like a rat in the walls. She eased the door open just an inch, the hinges groaning faintly, and slipped out, her boots silent on the concrete. The payphone loomed closer, its cracked plastic casing glinting under a flickering bulb. She crossed the hall in 3 strides, her heart thudding now. Not from nerves, but from the thrill of flipping his game. She snatched the receiver, the cold metal slick against her palm, and punched in Fort Hood's ops line from memory, her fingers flying despite the cuffs. The line crackled, then connected, and she whispered, "This is General Freeman, code Zulu 9er, detained at Killeen County Sheriff's Station off Highway 190. Send backup now." Colonel Jamal Pierce's voice cut through, calm but urgent. "On it, General, hold tight." She exhaled, a sliver of relief breaking through her steel, imagining Pierce rallying MPs, choppers spooling up 30 miles away. Then Carver's shadow loomed, his bulk filling the hall as he spun around, clipboard clattering to the floor. "What the hell?" he roared, his face twisting red, veins bulging in his neck like worms under skin. LaToya dropped the receiver, letting it swing, and stepped back. But he charged, slamming her against the wall before she could duck. Her skull cracked against the cinder block, a flash of pain blinding her for a split second, but she stayed, upright, glaring into his wild eyes. "You think you're slick?" he bellowed, grabbing her arm and wrenching her back toward the cell. He kicked the door wide, shoving her inside so hard she hit the cot, the rusted frame screeching as it skidded an inch. "Try that again and you're done," he snarled, locking the door with a savage twist, his knuckles white around the key. LaToya sank onto the cot, her head throbbing, blood trickling warm down her neck from where it had split against the wall. Carver paced outside, fists clenched, his victory soured by her defiance. She wiped the blood with her sleeve, smearing it across the green fabric, and smirked, faint but real. She'd made the call. Pierce was coming. Carver didn't know it yet, but his clock was ticking. What happens when a bully's throne starts to crack, she wondered, her breath steadying. What does it take to bury a man who thinks he's untouchable? She leaned back, eyes locked on the payphone through the bars, its dangling cord a silent promise of the storm she'd unleashed. "Now, let's hear from you in the comments. Type number 1 if you think Carver's already dug his own grave, with that shove, or number 2 if you believe LaToya's call won't be enough to stop him. Hit that like button if you're rooting for her to flip this nightmare upside down, and subscribe because the next twist is going to leave you speechless. So, what's coming next? Will Carver double down on his lies, or will LaToya's backup turn his world to ash? Stick around to find out. The air in the Killeen County Sheriff's Station hung heavy, thick with the tang of rust and desperation, as LaToya Freeman sat on the creaking cot, her wrists still cuffed, the metal edges grinding into her skin. Blood crusted on her neck from where Carver had slammed her against the wall, but her eyes stayed fixed, unblinking, on the locked cell door. Officer Dwayne Carver paced outside, his boots stomping a furious rhythm, his face a blotchy mess of red and sweat. He'd caught her mid-call, and now he was a coiled snake, rattled and ready to strike. Her whisper to Colonel Pierce echoed in her mind, Code Zulu Niner, a distress signal that would bring Fort Hood's wrath down on this backwater hellhole. But Carver didn't know that yet, and his ignorance was her edge. He stopped pacing, glaring through the bars, his thick fingers flexing like he wanted to choke the defiance out of her. "You think you're smart, huh?" he spat, spit flecking his chin. "Pulling that stunt with the phone? You just made this worse for yourself." LaToya didn't answer, letting him stew. She'd faced down warlords who'd sooner slit her throat than talk, and this man was no different, just louder and dumber. Carver spun away, storming to his desk, and yanked open a drawer, pulling out a notepad and a pen. He scribbled fast, his handwriting a jagged scrawl, muttering under his breath about fixing her good. She clocked his plan before he said it, the way his eyes darted, the way his lips twitched into a smirk. He was cooking up a lie, something to bury her deeper than a traffic stop ever could. Minutes ticked by, the station quiet except for the hum of a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. Then he slammed the notepad down, grabbed his radio, and barked into it. "Dispatch, this is Carver, Unit 12. Got an update on the female suspect. She assaulted me during the stop, lunged with intent, adding felony charges. Send backup for processing." His voice dripped with glee. A kid caught stealing candy and blaming the store. The radio crackled back. "Copy that, Carver. Backup en route. Need anything else?" He glanced at LaToya, his smirk widening, and said, "Nah, I got this." He hung up, sauntering back to her cell, and leaned in close, his sour breath fogging the bars. "Assaulting an officer. That's 10 years minimum. Should have kept your hands to yourself." LaToya's jaw tightened, but she held her tongue. She hadn't touched him, hadn't even flinched. But truth didn't matter here. This was his kingdom, and he was rewriting the rules. He turned, whistling a tuneless song, and headed down the hall, leaving her alone with the weight of his fabrication. She flexed her fingers, the cuffs clinking, and shifted her weight, testing the cot's frame. Her mind raced, piecing together his next move. He'd need evidence, something to sell his story, and she knew he'd find it, one way or another. 20 minutes later, Carver returned, a plastic evidence bag swinging from his hand. Inside was a switchblade, its blade dulled by rust, the kind you'd find in a junk drawer, not a general's SUV. He held it up, grinning like he'd struck gold. "Found this in your fancy truck," he said, shaking the bag. "Guess you thought you'd stick me with it, huh?" LaToya's stomach twisted, not from fear, but from the sheer gall of it. She'd never seen that knife, and he knew it. "That's not mine," she said, her voice steady, cutting through his gloat. "You planted it." He laughed, a harsh, barking sound, and tossed the bag onto his desk. "Prove it, Princess." "Oh, wait, you can't." He leaned back in his chair, feet propped up, savoring his little victory. She stared at the knife, her mind flashing to her expedition, parked outside, unlocked, a gift for a man like him to tamper with. The station door banged open, and 3 deputies shuffled in, their boots scuffing the floor, their eyes darting between Carver and LaToya. One, a wiry guy with a patchy beard, nodded at Carver. "Sheriff's here, wants her processed fast." Carver stood, cracking his knuckles, and said, "Good. Let's get her to the hearing room. No bail for this one." They hauled her up, 2 grabbing her arms, the 3rd trailing behind, and marched her down a narrow corridor to a cramped room with peeling paint and a single table. The sheriff, a barrel-chested man with a grey mustache and Carver's same cold eyes, sat waiting, a stack of papers in front of him. LaToya clocked the resemblance instantly, uncle and nephew, a family racket dressed up in badges. "General Freeman," the sheriff drawled, not looking up. "Assault, weapons possession, resisting arrest, busy night." She stood tall, cuffs chafing, and said, "All fabricated. Check my vehicle's dashcam. It'll show the truth." The sheriff snorted, flipping a page. "Dashcam's conveniently offline, technical glitch, they tell me." Carver smirked behind him, arms crossed, and LaToya's blood ran hot, though her face stayed ice. They'd covered their tracks, or thought they had. "I'm active duty, Fort Hood," she said, voice firm. "You're detaining a federal officer without cause." The sheriff finally met her gaze, his lips curling. "You're a suspect, not an officer, not here. Bail denied, back to lockup till trial." The deputies moved, dragging her out, Carver trailing with a grin that promised more pain. She stumbled into the hall, mind racing, when she caught a glimpse of a deputy's phone screen over his shoulder. The trucker's video from the stop was playing, shaky but clear, her cuffed. Against the hood, Carver's shove unmistakable. It had hit X, retweets climbing into the thousands, comments raging, "This is bullshit! Racist cop! Where's justice?" Her chest tightened, not with relief, but with a flicker of leverage. The world was watching, and Carver didn't know it yet. He barked at the deputy, "Put that damn thing away," oblivious to the storm brewing online. Back in her cell, he slammed the door, locking it with a flourish, and muttered, "Sleep tight. Court's gonna eat you alive." She sank onto the cot, the video looping in her head, a weapon she couldn't wield from here. Carver stomped off, leaving her alone, but the air felt different now, charged with something he couldn't see. She tilted her head, ears straining, and caught a faint thrum in the distance, a low rumble growing closer. Choppers, military grade, their rotors slicing the night 30 miles out. Fort Hood was coming, Pierce leading the charge, but Carver was too busy gloating to hear it. She leaned back, wrists throbbing, and let a ghost of a smile tug her lips. His lie was big, but hers was about to be bigger. The cell's concrete walls pressed in on LaToya Freeman, the air stale and damp, her wrists raw where the cuffs dug into her flesh. She sat rigid on the rusted cot, uniform smeared with dust and blood, her ears tuned to the faint, growing thrum. Outside, a sound officer Dwayne Carver couldn't hear over his own swagger. He lounged at his desk across the hall, flipping through a hunting magazine, chuckling at some private joke, oblivious to the storm she'd summoned with that stolen call to Fort Hood. The trucker's video was blowing up online. She'd seen the numbers climbing on the deputy's phone, thousands of eyes on her humiliation, but Carver thought he'd won, his planted knife and felony charges a noose around her neck. The thrum sharpened into a roar, unmistakable now, the heavy pulse of military choppers slicing through the Texas night. LaToya's lips twitched, a flicker of triumph she buried fast. Pierce was here. The station's front door burst open, hinges, squealing, and the floor shook as 2 Blackhawks touched down outside, their rotors kicking up a whirlwind of gravel and dust that rattled the windows. Carver jolted upright, magazine slipping to the floor, his jaw slack as Colonel Jamal Pierce stormed in, flanked by 6 MPs in full gear, rifles slung across their chests. Pierce was a wall of muscle, 6'4", his dark skin gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his eyes locked on Carver with a fury that could melt steel. "Where's General Freeman?" he barked, his voice a thunderclap, holding up a crisp Pentagon order, the red seal glinting like blood. The MPs fanned out, boots pounding, their presence swallowing the room. Carver scrambled to his feet, hands fumbling at his belt, stammering, "She's, detained, felony suspect. You can't just—" Pierce cut him off, stepping close, towering over him. "You detained a 3-star general on a traffic stop? Move, now!" Carver's face flushed purple, but he didn't budge, his pride a brick wall. The sheriff lumbered in from the back, his grey mustache twitching, eyes darting between Pierce and his nephew. "This is my station," he growled, planting himself beside Carver. "You got no jurisdiction here." Pierce didn't blink, shoving the order into the sheriff's chest. "Federal authority, active duty officer. Step aside or you're both in cuffs." The MPs shifted, hands tightening on their weapons, and the sheriff hesitated, his bravado cracking. Carver sputtered, "She assaulted me, got a knife." But Pierce wasn't listening. He nodded to the MPs who shoved past, one slamming Carver against the wall, his arm twisting behind his back. "Stay put," the MP snapped, while another kicked open the cell door with a clang that echoed like a gunshot. LaToya stood as they entered, her posture unbroken, the cuffs dangling from her wrists like badges of war. "Colonel," she said, voice steady, nodding at Pierce. He crossed the cell in 2 strides, pulling a key from his pocket, and unlocked the cuffs himself, the metal clattering to the floor. "You good, General?" he asked, his tone soft but urgent, eyes scanning the blood on her neck. "I've had worse," she said, rolling her shoulders, the ache flaring but ignored. She stepped out, boots clicking on the concrete, and faced Carver, still pinned by the MP. His eyes bulged, wild with rage, but she met them with ice, her silence louder than any shout. The sheriff backed off, muttering about paperwork, but Pierce waved him silent, leading LaToya toward the exit. The MPs formed a wall around her, their rifles a steel promise, and she walked tall, head high, the station shrinking behind her. Outside, the night was chaos, chopper blades slicing the air, dust swirling in thick clouds that stung her eyes. A crowd had gathered beyond the perimeter, phones glowing, voices shouting her name. "General Freeman, General Freeman." The trucker's video had spread like wildfire, X ablaze with hashtags, "Justice for Freeman" trending as onlookers cheered her freedom. She climbed into the lead Black Hawk, Pierce beside her, and the bird lifted off, the station fading into a speck below. "Carver's done," Pierce said over the roar, handing her a tablet showing the viral footage, her cuffed against the hood, his shove clear as day. "Pentagon's pissed, JAG's already on it." LaToya nodded. He planted a knife, claimed, "Assault," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Framed me deeper after the call." Pierce's jaw clenched. "We'll bury him. Sheriff, too." The chopper banked over the plains, Fort Hood's lights winking in the distance, and LaToya let herself exhale, the first real breath since Carver's lights flashed in her mirror. She briefed Pierce fast, laying out the stop, the lockup, the fabricated charges, her words clipped and precise, a soldier's report. He typed notes on the tablet, fury simmering in his silence, and promised a full investigation by dawn. They landed at the base, MPs saluting as she stepped onto the tarmac, her uniform a battered flag of defiance. She thought it was over. The nightmare snapped shut by that one call. She'd head home, check on her sister, sleep for the first time in 30 hours. But as she crossed the base, her phone buzzed, a late-night call from an unknown number. She answered, expecting Pierce with an update. Instead, a raspy voice hissed, "Check your address, General. We know where you live." Her blood froze, the words sinking in slow and cold. She pulled up X on her phone, scrolling fast, and there it was. A post from a burner account, her home address in Killeen, 30 miles south, pinned with a photo of her house, curtains drawn, her niece's bike on the porch. The caption read, "Time to pay." Comments piled up, vile and jagged, slurs and threats from faceless cowards, egged on by a network Carver clearly knew. She showed Pierce, her hand steady despite the rage boiling inside. "He leaked it," she said, voice low, "before we got here." Pierce cursed, grabbing his radio to call base security, but LaToya was already moving, mind racing 30 miles ahead. Carver wasn't done, not by a long shot. His badge was gone, but his hate had claws, and now it was reaching for her family. Let's hear your take in the comments. Type number 1 if you think Carver's crossed a line he can't come back from, or number 2 if you reckon LaToya's got more fight in her than he can handle. Smash that like button if you're stunned by how fast this rescue flipped into revenge, and subscribe because the next chapter's gonna hit harder than those choppers. So, what's brewing now? Will LaToya race to save her kin, or will Carver's next strike burn everything she loves to the ground? Stay tuned to see. LaToya Freeman's boots pounded the tarmac as she sprinted from the Black Hawk's landing pad at Fort Hood. Her uniform still streaked with jailhouse grime, her phone clutched tight, the burner's threat looping in her skull. "We know where you live." The Texas night was a black void, stars swallowed by clouds, but her focus burned bright, locked 30 miles south, where her sister Tasha's house sat exposed, her 9-year-old niece Maya asleep inside. Colonel Pierce shouted after her, "General, wait, we'll send a unit." But she didn't slow, snagging keys from a base motor pool jeep, its engine growling to life as she floored it. Carver's leak had unleashed something feral, a hate, group tied to his twisted world, and she wasn't waiting for protocol to save her kin. The jeep's tires squealed, kicking up dust, and she tore onto Highway 190, the same road where this nightmare started, her mind a steel trap of rage and calculation. The speedometer hit 80, then 90, the wind howling through the open window, whipping her braids loose from their bun. Her phone buzzed again, Pierce's voice crackling. "Security's 10 minutes out, LaToya. Hold position." She didn't answer, tossing the phone onto the passenger seat, her eyes scanning the dark for taillights, for trouble. Tasha's place was a modest ranch house on Killeen's edge, a quiet street flanked by scrubby fields, the kind of spot Carver's ilk would torch without a second thought. She remembered Maya's bike in that X-post, pink and scuffed, a birthday gift she'd built herself, and her chest tightened, a rare crack in her armor. 20 miles out, headlights flared in her rear view, too close, too fast, a pickup truck, weaving like a drunk predator. She gripped the wheel tighter, her knuckles whitening, and pushed the jeep to 100, the engine screaming in protest. The truck gained, its horn blaring, a guttural bellow that drowned the wind. LaToya swerved, testing them, and they matched her. A rusted Dodge Ram with tinted windows, its grille a jagged sneer. She couldn't see faces, but she felt their intent, a pack unleashed by Carver's spite. 15 miles from Tasha's, the road dipped into a hollow and the truck rammed her bumper, metal crunching, jolting her forward. Her head snapped back, pain flaring, but she held the wheel, veering left to shake them. They rammed again harder and the jeep fishtailed, gravel spraying as she fought for control. She cursed under her breath, years of combat driving kicking in, and floored it through the skid, pulling ahead. The truck roared behind, relentless, a shadow she couldn't lose. 5 miles out, she hit Tasha's street, a quiet lane lined with sagging fences, and slammed the brakes, the jeep skidding to a stop 50 yards from the house. Smoke curled from the yard, orange flickers dancing in the dark, and her gut dropped. 3 pickups circled the property, their beds loaded with hooded figures, Molotov cocktails arcing through the air like comets, glass shattered, flames licking up the porch, and Maya's scream pierced the night, high and raw from an upstairs window. LaToya leapt from the jeep, popping the trunk, and grabbed her personal Beretta from a locked case. The weight familiar, cold steel against her palm. She chambered around, her hands steady despite the chaos, and sprinted toward the house, the gun low but ready. The mob didn't see her at first, too busy whooping and hurling fire, their hoods white and stained, a throwback to nightmares her father had survived. She counted 8, maybe 10, their laughter a sick chorus as the flames spread. "Burn it down!" one yelled, his voice thick with beer and hate, and LaToya's blood boiled, her soldiers' calm snapping into focus. She fired twice into the air, sharp cracks splitting the night, and the mob froze, heads whipping toward her. "Back off!" she roared, advancing, the Beretta trained on the nearest figure, a lanky man clutching a bottle. He flinched, dropping it, the glass smashing on the dirt, and the others scattered, ducking behind trucks. She fired again, a warning shot clipping a tire, rubber hissing as it deflated, and 3 bolted, peeling out in a cloud of exhaust. The rest regrouped, bolder now, one pulling a shotgun from a truck bed, its barrel glinting under a streetlight. "You're dead, bitch," he snarled, racking around, and LaToya dove behind the Jeep as buckshot peppered the hood, metal pinging like hail. She rolled, popping up to return fire, her shot punching through his shoulder, blood spraying as he dropped, howling. Another swung a bat, charging her, and she sidestepped, slamming the Beretta's grip into his temple, dropping him cold. The flames roared higher, heat searing her face, and Maya's cries grew frantic. "Auntie Toya!" LaToya glanced up, spotting her niece's silhouette against the window, Tasha yanking her back. She had seconds before the house became an inferno. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but closing, and the mob hesitated, their bravado wilting. LaToya seized it, standing tall, gun raised, and shouted, "Leave, or I paint this street red." Her voice was a blade, honed by years of command, and 2 more fled, trucks roaring off. The last, a wiry guy with a skull tattoo, lobbed a final Molotov, the bottle shattering at her feet, flames licking her boots. She stomped it out, lunging at him, and drove her elbow into his jaw, bone crunching. As he crumpled, the sirens grew louder, red and blue flashing at the street's end, and she turned, racing for the house, smoke choking her lungs as she kicked the burning door in. Inside, the heat was a wall, the living room ablaze, furniture curling into ash. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time, coughing, and found Tasha and Maya huddled in the hall, eyes wide with terror. "Move!" she barked, shoving them toward the back door, flames licking the walls behind. They stumbled out, collapsing on the grass as Carver's deputies screeched up, not Fort Hood's unit, their lights blinding. LaToya spun, expecting help, but the lead deputy, a squat man with Carver's smirk, barked, "Drop the weapon." She froze, Beretta still in hand, and he advanced, cuffs out. "Discharging a firearm, public endangerment," he said, voice dripping with glee. "You're under arrest." They cuffed her again, her wrists screaming from the fresh metal, and dragged her to a cruiser as Tasha shouted, "She saved us!" The house burned, a roaring beast, Maya sobbing in her mother's arms, and the deputies ignored them, shoving LaToya inside. Online, the trucker's video morphed, a new clip hitting X from a burner account. Black General goes rogue, her warning shots twisted into a rampage, Carver's fingerprints all over the edit. She sat in the cruiser, head high, watching. The flames devour her sister's life, knowing this wasn't over. Carver's hate had teeth, and it was biting deeper than she'd ever imagined. LaToya Freeman sat in the back of the cruiser, her wrists throbbing under fresh cuffs, the metal cold and biting as the deputy's headlights glared off the smoldering wreckage of her sister Tasha's house. Smoke curled into the Texas sky, thick and acrid, choking the air as flames devoured the last of the porch where Maya's bike lay melted into a twisted heap. Tasha clutched her daughter on the grass, tears streaking their faces, their home a bonfire lit by Carver's hate. The squat deputy who'd cuffed her, a man with a buzz cut and a sneer that mirrored Carver's, leaned against the cruiser door, scribbling on a clipboard. "Discharging a firearm in city limits," he muttered, loud enough for his partner to nod. "Public endangerment too, she's a menace." LaToya's jaw clenched, but she kept silent, her eyes burning into his back, counting every lie he stacked against her. She'd saved her family, scattered that mob with bullets and grit, and now they were twisting it into another cage. The cruiser rolled back to the Killeen County Sheriff's Station, the same grimy hellhole she'd escaped hours ago, its concrete, walls looming like a trap snapping shut. They dragged her inside, past the same jeering deputies who'd mocked her before, their smirks wider now, feeding off her return. "Back so soon, Princess?" one called, twirling a pen like it was a victory lap. They shoved her into a holding cell smaller than the last, the air rancid with mildew, a single bulb buzzing overhead. Carver wasn't there, still licking his wounds from Pierce's raid, but his shadow hung over every move. The squat deputy tossed a plastic bag onto a table outside her cell, its contents rattling, and Latoya's stomach sank. White powder glinted. Inside, sealed tight, a brick of what looked like cocaine labeled with her name in Sharpie. "Found this in the ashes," he said, grinning, his teeth stained yellow. "Guess you're a dealer, too." She lunged to the bars, cuffs clanking. Her voice a low growl. "That's a plant. You know it." He shrugged, turning away, and muttered, "Tell it to the judge." Her mind raced, piecing it together. Carver's militia had torched the house, and his cronies had slipped this in, a felony to bury her, deeper than the knife ever could. The cell door slammed shut, the lock clicking, and she paced, 3 steps forward, 3 back, her boots scuffing the floor. She'd beaten worse odds, survived ambushes in Mosul, outsmarted spies in Berlin, but this was a war on her own soil, and the enemy wore badges. Hours crawled by, the station humming with whispers, until the sheriff's voice boomed from the hall. "Get her ready. Press is waiting." They hauled her out, cuffs digging fresh welts, and marched her to the station's front steps, where a dozen news vans had parked, cameras flashing like gunfire. The sheriff stood at a podium, his grey mustache twitching, Carver lurking behind him. Reinstated somehow, his uniform pristine, a smug glint in his eyes. "General Latoya Freeman," the sheriff drawled, "arrested tonight for drug trafficking. Endangerment and assault, a disgrace to her uniform." Microphones thrust forward, reporters shouting, "What's the evidence? Why the house fire?" The sheriff held up the bagged powder, the crowd gasping, and Latoya's blood roared in her ears. Carver stepped closer, whispering, "Told you I'd win," his breath hot and sour. She glared back, unbowed, but the cameras ate it up, her cuffed silhouette a headline they'd spin into ruin. Back in the cell, she sank onto the cot, the broadcast echoing from a deputy's radio, painting her as a rogue, a criminal in stars. Her phone was gone, confiscated, but she knew Pierce would hear this. Fort Hood would stir. She waited, plotting, when her cell door creaked open at dawn, an MP slipping in with a nod. "Colonel sent me," he whispered, passing a burner phone. She dialed Pierce, her voice steady despite the ache in her bones. "They've got drugs planted in the fire, sheriff's in on it," Pierce cursed, loud and raw. "I'm calling JAG. Major Kia Rollins is on her way. Hold tight." The MP vanished, and Latoya hid the phone under the cot, her pulse steadying. Help was coming again. Hours later, Rollins arrived, a wiry woman with a shaved head and a stare that could cut glass, her JAG uniform crisp against the station's filth. She stormed into the interrogation room where Latoya sat, cuffed to a table, and slapped a file down. "No chain of custody on that bag," she said, voice sharp. "No fingerprints, no witnesses. It's garbage." The sheriff scowled, but Rollins pressed, "Dismiss it, or I take this federal." The sheriff balked, Carver hovering, his fists clenched, and after a tense standoff he growled, "Fine," drug charges dropped. Latoya stood as they uncuffed her, wrists red and bruised, and walked out with Rollins, the station silent behind her. She thought it was over. The frame-up cracked open, her name half cleared. She stepped into the morning light, Pierce waiting in a Humvee, his face grim but relieved. "You're free, General. We'll nail Carver for this." She nodded, climbing in, ready to check on Tasha and Maya, when an explosion rocked Fort Hood, 3 miles north, a fireball blooming over the admin building where her office sat. The Humvee screeched to a halt, Pierce shouting into his radio. "What the hell was that?" Static crackled back. "Bomb at HQ. Clerk's dead. Looks like Freeman's desk." Latoya's gut twisted, her victory souring fast. They sped to the base, smoke choking the horizon, MPs swarming the wreckage. A charred note fluttered in the debris, scrawled in black. "You did this." Evidence piled up quick, her access codes, her signature on a fake requisition, all pointing to her rigging the blast in revenge. Pierce stared at her, disbelief warring with duty, and she shook her head, voice hard. "Carver, he's not done." The MPs hesitated, but orders came from above. Detain her for questioning. She surrendered her Beretta, hands raised as they cuffed her again, the 3rd time in 2 days, her uniform a tattered shield. The clerk's blood was on her desk, her career teetering, and Carver's grin flashed in her mind, a ghost pulling strings from the shadows. She sat in the Humvee, wrists aching, knowing this was his checkmate. A blow worse than fire or lies, and she'd have to claw her way out again. Let's get your thoughts in the comments. Type number 1 if you think Carver's gone too. Far-framing LaToya for murder. Or number 2 if you believe she'll outsmart this trap like she's done before. Hit that like button if this bomb twist left you reeling, and subscribe because the next part's gonna flip everything you expect. So what's on the horizon? Can LaToya dodge this deadly setup, or will Carver's next move bury her for good? Keep watching to find out. LaToya Freeman sat in the back of the Humvee, wrists raw under the cuffs for the 3rd time in 48 hours, the acrid stench of smoke from the Fort Hood explosion still clinging to her uniform. The admin building's wreckage smoldered. 3 miles away, a clerk's blood staining her desk, her name scrawled on a charred note that pinned the blast on her. MPs flanked her, their faces tight with confusion, rifles stiff across their laps, while Colonel Pierce gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, radio crackling with orders to detain General Freeman for questioning. Her access codes, her signature, all forged to frame her as a vengeful bomber, pointed straight to Carver's revenge. She met Pierce's eyes in the rear view, her voice low. "You know I didn't do this." He nodded, jaw clenched, but said, "Orders are orders. LaToya, we'll sort it." She didn't argue, her mind already 5 moves ahead, plotting escape from a net tightening by the second. The Humvee rolled toward the base brig, MPs swarming the gates, their flashlights slicing the dawn. LaToya's face was everywhere. News, choppers buzzed overhead, X ablaze with Rogue General bombs Fort Hood, her cuffed silhouette from the sheriff's press conference now a mugshot on every screen. She was a wanted woman, her 30-year career shredded in a night, and Carver's grin loomed in her thoughts, a puppet master pulling strings from his cell. The Humvee slowed at a checkpoint, MPs barking clearance codes, and LaToya spotted her chance, a gap in the line, a shadowed alley between barracks 50 yards off. She twisted her wrists, testing the cuffs, her skin screaming, but her resolve iron. She'd slipped Taliban checkpoints in Helmand, evaded drones in Syria. This was just another mission, deadlier because it was home. Pierce glanced back, sensing her shift, and whispered, "Don't." She locked eyes with him, a silent apology, and lunged as the Humvee door cracked open for an MP's check. She slammed her shoulder into the soldier, knocking him back, and bolted, cuffs clanking, boots pounding asphalt. Shouts erupted. "Stop! Her!" And rifles snapped up, but she dove into the alley, shadows swallowing her as bullets chipped the wall behind. Her legs burned, lungs heaving, but she zigzagged through the base, dodging patrols, her uniform a beacon she couldn't shed. She hit a motor pool, ducking behind a jeep, and ripped a tarp off a toolbox, snagging a screwdriver. Panting, she worked it into the cuff's lock, her fingers slick with sweat, and popped them free, the metal clattering to the ground. She was loose, but not safe. LaToya slipped off base, cutting through a dry creek bed, thorns snagging her sleeves until she hit a dusty road 10 miles out. A neon sign flickered ahead. Motel 6. Its lot empty save for a rusted pickup. She broke in with the screwdriver, slipping $50 from her pocket under the clerk's nose for a room. No questions. Inside, the space stank of mildew. A single bed sagging under stained sheets. A cracked TV buzzing static. She locked the door, peeled off her bloodied jacket, and sank onto the floor, pulling a burner phone from her sock. Pierce's MP had slipped it to her, a lifeline. She powered it on, hands trembling, and hacked into Carver's personal email, a trick she'd learned from cyber ops in Baghdad. His password was weak, Texas Pride 88, and she scrolled fast, bile rising as she found messages to a supremacist, Group Patriot Sons, detailing her address leak, the bomb, all signed with his initials. She forwarded the emails to a reporter at the Austin Chronicle, a woman she'd met at a veterans gala, attaching a note. Expose this. General Freeman. The send button clicked and she leaned back, chest heaving, imagining the story breaking, Carver's name in mud. She'd outed him, a checkmate from the shadows, and for a moment she breathed easier, the motel's hum a brief reprieve. But the TV flickered, news cutting in. General Freeman fugitive linked to Fort Hood bombing. Her photo flashed, grainy and grim, and she cursed, knowing MPs were closing in. She grabbed the burner, slipping out the back as headlights swept the lot, MPs shouting coordinates. She ran, ducking into a pecan grove, branches clawing her face pell, until she hit a gas station, its lights dim, and hid behind a dumpster, heart slamming. Her gamble paid off. X lit up with the leak. Cop tied to hate group frames general, the reporter's story spreading like wildfire, outrage boiling in the comments. LaToya peeked at the burner, relief flickering, thinking exposure would end it. But sirens wailed closer and her phone buzzed, Pierce's voice tight. "They hit your brother's shop. Jalen's hurt bad. Carver's people." Her breath caught, Jalen's face flashing, her mechanic brother quiet and steady, now a target. She pulled up X again and there it was. A video of Jalen's auto shop in Killeen, windows smashed, him crumpled on the floor, blood pooling, a hooded figure kicking him as a voice laughed, harboring a traitor. The leak had backfired. Carver's allies spinning it, painting her a snitch endangering cops. Public fury turning on her. LaToya's fists clenched, nails digging into her palms, the dumpster's stink mixing with her rage. Jalen was in a coma because she'd fought back, his shop trashed, his life hanging by a thread. She'd exposed Carver, but he'd hit harder, his network a hydra she couldn't kill. She wiped sweat from her brow, uniform clinging wet, and plotted her next move. The gas station's payphone glinted 10 yards off, a risk but a chance. She crept to it, coins from the motel clerk jangling in her pocket, and dialed Pierce, whispering, "Jalen's down. I need intel on Carver's crew." He cursed, "You're a ghost, LaToya. MPs are everywhere. Lay low." She hung up, slipping, back into the shadows as a patrol car rolled by, its spotlight missing her by inches. She was alone now, a fugitive in her own country, her leak a double-edged sword. Carver's face loomed in her mind, smug even in jail, his reach strangling her family while she ran. The grove's silence pressed in, broken by a distant chopper, and she sank against a tree, breath ragged, uniform torn at the knees. She'd survived wars, but this was a battlefield she hadn't trained for, where every win birthed a worse loss. Her brother's blood was on her hands, figuratively and maybe literally, and she knew Carver wouldn't stop until she was dead or broken. She closed her eyes just for a second and vowed to end him no matter the cost. LaToya Freeman crouched behind the gas station dumpster, the night pressing in, her uniform torn and damp with sweat, the burner phone's faint glow her only light. Jalen's bloodied face haunted her, his shop trashed by Carver's militia, a brutal counterpunch to her leaked emails exposing his supremacist ties. She was a fugitive, hunted by MPs and vilified online, snitch trending beside her name as Carver's allies twisted her fight into chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, too close, and she slipped deeper into the pecan grove, thorns snagging her sleeves, her breath sharp and ragged. She'd survived wars, but this was personal, a knife in her gut with every step. Carver was in jail, cuffed after Pierce's raid, but his reach stretched beyond bars, and she knew he'd gloat until she faced him down. She stopped, leaning against a gnarled trunk and made a call, whispering into the burner, "Pierce, get me Carver's location. I'm ending this." He hissed back, "He's at the station. Don't do it, LaToya." She hung up, boots crunching dirt, heading for Killeen. The sheriff's station loomed 30 minutes later, a squat fortress under flickering sodium lights, deputies milling outside, oblivious to her shadow slipping through the lot. She'd ditched her jacket, uniform dark enough to blend, and taped a tiny cam to her chest, a gift from a recon op in Somalia, its lens hidden under her collar. She wasn't armed, not with MPs on her tail, but her fists and wits had won battles before. She picked the back lock with a bent wire from the grove, the door creaking open, and slid inside, the hall reeking of bleach and defeat. Carver sat in an interrogation room, uncuffed, laughing with a deputy, his blonde buzz cut glinting under the bulb. She stepped in, slamming the door shut, and the deputy jumped, hand on his holster. "Out," she snapped, voice steel, and he bolted, too green to argue. Carver's grin faltered, then widened, his pale eyes glinting. "Well, well, the runaway general." LaToya stood across the table, hands loose, cam rolling silently. "You're done, Carver," she said, voice low, cutting through his smug. "Your emails, your Patriot sons, it's all out, you're cooked." He leaned back, chair creaking, and chuckled, a wet, ugly sound. "You think a leak stops me? I planted that knife, torched your sister's place, bombed your office. You've got nothing." Her pulse spiked, but she kept still, letting him talk, his words gold for the cam. "Jalen's brains on the floor. My boys did that," he bragged, tapping the table. "Sheriff's my uncle, deputies my dogs, you're a dead woman walking." She stepped closer, towering over him, and said, "Say it again, loud." He sneered, standing, nose an inch from hers. "I framed you, bitch. Every lie, every drop of blood, mine. You'll never prove it." She smiled, cold and sharp, and tapped her chest, the cam's red light blinking now, live streaming to X via the burner's hotspot. "I just did." His face froze, eyes darting, and he lunged, fists swinging, but she ducked, slamming her elbow into his gut, doubling him. "Over," he gasped, clawing at her, and she kneed his chin, teeth clacking as he hit the floor. Deputies burst in, shouting, "Freeze!" But she raised her hands, cam still rolling, Carver's confession echoing online. Millions watched, X crashing. With views, Carver confesses exploding as his racist rants, slurs, threats, all unfiltered, damned him live. The sheriff stormed in, face purple, barking, "Shut it off." But an MP shoved through, cuffing Carver, his wrists twisting. As he screamed, "She set me up!" LaToya stepped back, hands high, as Pierce arrived, MPs swarming, his voice cutting the chaos. "Stand down, she's clear." The sheriff balked. "She's a fugitive." But Pierce held up his tablet, X's live feed mirrored, Carver's words looping, "I framed you, every lie." The room stilled, deputies paling, and the sheriff growled, "Suspend him now," shoving Carver at an MP. LaToya walked out, uncuffed, head high, the station's air thick with defeat. Online, the nation roared, her name trending again. Hero. General exposes cop. Cheers drowning the hate. Pierce clapped her shoulder. "You're free, LaToya, he's finished." She nodded, exhaustion seeping in, thinking it was over, her gambit a knockout blow. She stepped into the dawn, MPs saluting, the crowd beyond the lot chanting her name, phones aloft. She'd won Carver's career ash, his confession a noose he'd tied himself. But as she crossed the street, a crack split the air. A sniper's, bullet grazing her shoulder, blood blooming hot through her sleeve. She dove behind a cruiser, pain searing, and scanned the rooftops, spotting a hooded figure, rifle glinting, vanishing into the haze. Shouts erupted, MPs firing back, but he was gone, a ghost of Carver's militia, loyal beyond his fall. Pierce dragged her to cover, yelling, "Medic!" as she pressed her hand to the wound, crimson soaking her fingers. Her phone buzzed. Tasha's. Voice sobbing. "Maya's gone, they took her from the hospital." LaToya's world tilted, the victory hollowed out in a heartbeat. She'd exposed Carver, walked free, but his crew struck back, snatching her niece, a 9-year-old caught in their war. Pierce cursed, radioing base, "Amber alert now." But LaToya stood, blood dripping, eyes steel despite the pain. "They're not done," she said, voice ablade, knowing Carver's hate had claws she hadn't cut. The crowd's cheers faded. Sirens wailing, and she stumbled forward, shoulder throbbing. Mind racing to Maya, to Jalen still comatose, to a fight that wouldn't end. Carver was down, but his poison lived, and she'd bleed until it stopped. Let's hear your take in the comments. Type number 1 if you think LaToya's showdown proved she's unbreakable, or number 2 if you reckon Carver's militia just stole her win out from under her. Smash that like button if this live confession twist had you on edge, and subscribe because the next chapter's going to rip your heart out. So what's lurking ahead? Will LaToya hunt down Maya's kidnappers, or will Carver's ghost strike her down before she can? Stay locked in to see. LaToya Freeman crouched behind the sheriff's cruiser, blood seeping hot through her sleeve, where the sniper's bullet had grazed her shoulder, the sting sharp but drowned by the roar in her chest. Maya was gone, snatched from the hospital, by Carver's militia, Tasha's sob still echoing through the phone clutched in her trembling hand. The Killeen dawn was grey, smoke from her showdown with Carver lingering in the air, MPs shouting coordinates as they swept the rooftops for the shooter. Colonel Pierce knelt beside her, pressing a bandage to her wound, his voice tight. "You're hit, Latoya. Stay down." She shook him off, standing, her uniform torn and bloodied, eyes locked on the horizon where her niece vanished. "They've got Maya," she said, voice a jagged edge, and Pierce cursed, radioing base. "Get me everything on Patriot Sons now." She didn't wait, staggering forward, pain a distant hum beneath her fury. She stumbled to Pierce's Humvee, ripping open the door, and rummaged through his gear, snagging a med kit to wrap her shoulder, the gauze soaking red fast. Her mind raced, mapping Killeen's edges, old training kicking in. Find the enemy, hit them hard. Carver's confession had aired live. His career ash, but his crew didn't care. Their hate a wildfire she couldn't stamp out. She remembered a barn 10 miles east, abandoned, a spot Jalen had scouted for parts, its sagging roof a perfect hideout for scum like them. Pierce climbed in, shouting, "Latoya, we'll handle this!" But she floored it, tires screeching, the Humvee lurching onto Highway 195. "She's 9, she growled, "and they're dead if they touch her." He gripped the dash, radio crackling, but didn't stop her. The barn loomed 10 minutes later, a rotting hulk in a field of dead grass. 2 pickups parked crooked out front, their beds stained with oil and ash. Latoya killed the engine 100 yards off, slipping out, Pierce whispering, "Wait for backup." She ignored him, spotting a rifle in the Humvee's rack, an M4, and grabbed it, checking the mag with blood-slick hands. Her shoulder screamed, but she moved low, boots silent on the dirt, the barn's splintered walls leaking faint light. Voices drifted out, rough and laughing. "Little brat's quiet now," one said, and Latoya's blood turned to ice. She peeked through a cracked board, seeing Maya tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. 5 hooded figures circling her, one twirling a knife. Latoya didn't think, just acted, years of combat snapping into place. She kicked the barn door in, wood splintering, and fired a burst into the ceiling, dust raining as the men spun, shouting, "What the hell?" She advanced, rifle steady despite the throb in her shoulder, barking, "Drop it, or I drop you!" The fall. Knife guy lunged, blade flashing, and she sidestepped, slamming the rifle butt into his skull, bone cracking as he fell. Another pulled a pistol, but she fired first, 2 rounds punching his chest, blood spraying as he hit the dirt. The others froze, hands up, hood slipping to reveal scarred, snarling faces, Carver's loyal dogs. She ripped the tape off Maya's mouth, her niece gasping, "Auntie!" and untied her, pulling her close, the girl's sobs soaking her uniform. Pierce burst in, MPs storming behind, rifles sweeping, and the last 3 surrendered, cuffed face down in the filth. Latoya held Maya tight, her niece trembling, whispering, "You came," and she nodded, throat burning, "Always." Pierce clapped her back, voice gruff, "You're a damn force, General." The MPs secured the scene, radios buzzing with suspects down, and Latoya carried Maya to the Humvee, her shoulder leaking through the bandage, pain a dull roar she ignored. News choppers circled overhead, X lighting up with "General saves." "Niece!" the nation hailing her again, clips of the barn raid spreading fast. She sat Maya in the front seat, buckling her in, thinking it was over. The militia cracked, Carver's reach severed. They rolled back to Fort Hood, MPs escorting, Maya clinging to her arm, the base a blur of salutes and medics rushing to patch her up. Pierce briefed her, "Patriot Sons are done, Carver's locked tight now." She nodded, exhaustion clawing her bones, ready to see Tasha, to check Jalen's coma, to breathe. But as they hit the gate, a Pentagon courier met them, face grim, handing her a sealed envelope. She tore it open, scanning fast, and her gut dropped. General Freeman suspended pending review. Reckless conduct in civilian jurisdiction. Pierce cursed. "After all this?" She stared at the paper, the words a slap after her blood-soaked win. Her medals, her rank, stripped on a technicality. Carver's ghost laughing from his cell. Worse came on the radio, a breaking report. New audio surfaces, General Freeman ordering barn assault. She froze, recognizing the voice, hers, but chopped, doctored, "Take 'em out," a lie spliced from old mission tapes. X flipped. Again hero or vigilante, trending, the public turning, her rescue spun into madness. Pierce slammed the dash. "Carver's work. He's still pulling strings." LaToya's fists balled, blood crusting her knuckles, knowing he'd leaked it from jail, a final gut punch to her name. MPs approached, hesitant. "Ma'am, we need you at HQ." And she stood, handing Maya to Pierce, her voice steel despite the ache. "Take her to Tasha. I'll handle this." She walked to the brig, uncuffed but a prisoner again, her shoulder patched, uniform a tattered flag. The nation's cheers faded, replaced by whispers of doubt, Carver's audio, a venom she couldn't shake. She'd saved Maya, killed his crew, but he'd turned her victory to ash, her career dangling by a thread. Sitting in the holding room, walls cold and grey, she stared at the ceiling, mind racing. He'd hit her family, her base, her name, everything. She'd built and she'd still fight, but the cost was piling up, a mountain of blood and ruin. LaToya Freeman sat in the Fort Hood brig, the holding room's grey walls closing in, her bloodied uniform stiff against her skin, the makeshift bandage on her grazed shoulder itching with dried sweat. The air was cold, sterile, buzzing with the hum of a single bulb overhead, her suspension notice crumpled in her fist. She'd rescued Maya, taken down Carver's militia in that barn, but the Pentagon had clipped her wings. Reckless conduct, a flimsy excuse after his doctored. Audio painted her a vigilante. Her medals hung in limbo, her career a ghost, and Jalen still lay comatose, Tasha clinging to Maya at the hospital 30 miles away. She leaned back, head against the concrete, replaying every move, every strike, searching for the leak that turned her triumph to ash. Carver was cuffed, his confession live-streamed, but his venom kept flowing, and she knew someone close had fed it. The door creaked open, Major Kia Rollins stepping in, her JAG uniform crisp, shaved head gleaming under the light, file tucked under her arm. LaToya's gut tightened. Rollins had saved her from the drug frame-up, tossed Carver's lies at the sheriff's feet, but her eyes now flickered with something off, a shadow LaToya hadn't clocked before. "General," Rollins said, voice smooth, setting the file down. "Pentagon's reviewing the barn raid. I'm here to help." LaToya nodded, slow, studying her, the woman's calm too polished, her fingers tapping the table too fast. "Good," LaToya said, voice low, "because that audio's bullshit. Carver's still pulling strings." Rollins leaned in. "We'll prove it. I've got your back." But the words rang hollow, a tinny echo in LaToya's ears, and suspicion coiled tight in her chest. She stood, pacing the room's 3-step width, cuffs off but feeling heavier than ever. "Who had access to my old tapes?" and she asked, eyes on Rollins. "That Take 'em Out clip, it's from Syria 2 years back. Someone dug it up, spliced it." Rollins shrugged, too casual. "Could be anyone at HQ. I'll dig into it." LaToya stopped, turning sharp. "You were at HQ. You handled my case files." Rollins froze just a beat, then smiled, thin and tight. "You're tired, General. Don't overthink this." But LaToya's mind was a blade, cutting through the fog, and she saw it. Rollins' late-night calls during the drug case, her questions about old missions, too specific, too hungry. LaToya lunged, grabbing Rollins' arm, twisting it back, file clattering to the floor. "Who paid you?" she hissed, voice a growl, shoving her against the wall. Rollins gasped, struggling. "Let go, you're crazy." But LaToya pressed harder, forearm to her throat. "Carver's crew, how much?" The door banged open, an MP shouting, "Stand down!" But LaToya held firm, Rollins' eyes darting, panic cracking her mask. "10 grand, she choked. "Patriot sons through a proxy. They wanted you gone." LaToya's blood roared, betrayal a fist in her gut, and she slammed Rollins' recorder from her pocket onto the table, hitting play. The confessions spilled. Out, tinny and damning. "I gave them the tapes, faked the audio." The MP froze, radio crackling, and LaToya stepped back, releasing her, Rollins slumping, face pale. "Cuff her," LaToya snapped, and the MP obeyed, metal clicking as Rollins stammered, "I had no choice." LaToya glared. "You sold me out. Jalen's blood, Maya's screams. That's on you." Pierce burst in, tablet in hand. Caught it live. Pentagon's watching. He uploaded the recording. X erupting with JAG betrays General, outrage flipping the narrative again. Hours later, Brass called, Voice clipped over speaker. Suspension lifted, Freeman. Full reinstatement. Rollins is ours now. LaToya stood tall. Uniform a battered shield as MPs hauled Rollins out. Her career dust. She walked free, Pierce at her side, the base buzzing with salutes, news vans swarming the gates. You're back, General, he said, clapping her shoulder, and she nodded, exhaustion warring with steel. Carver's conviction was sealed, Rollins' confession the final nail, and the nation cheered again. Hero General cleared. Trending. High. She thought it was over, her name restored, her family safe. But as she reached the Humvee, a blast shook Killeen, 30 miles south, a fireball lighting the sky where her house stood. Pierce's radio screamed, "Residential explosion!" Freeman's address. She ran for the vehicle, flooring it, smoke rising like a beacon, her gut screaming Carver's name. The drive was a blur, tires howling, Pierce shouting, "Slow down!" But she didn't, hitting her street to find her home a crater, windows blown out, flames licking the frame. Tasha and Maya were at the hospital, safe, but her sisters... Call confirmed. Jalen's awake but hurt bad. LaToya stumbled from the Humvee, coughing ash, and found a note pinned to a charred mailbox, scrawled in red, "You'll never outrank me." Carver's words, but he was in jail, locked tight. Then word came, sheriff's riot, staged chaos. Carver escaped, a rogue deputy springing him. Pierce cursed, "He's loose," and LaToya's fists clenched, blood dripping from her grazed shoulder, the wound tearing open. She stood in the rubble, her life a pyre. Tasha's sobs echoing in her ears, Jalen's recovery fragile, Maya's trust shaken. Carver had burned her world, a final strike from the shadows, his militia, a ghost she couldn't kill. MPs swarmed, Pierce barking orders. Find him. But LaToya knew he'd vanish, a snake in the grass, plotting worse. Her reinstatement felt hollow, stars on her collar meaningless against the ash at her feet. She picked up a scorched photo, her with Jalen and Maya, smiling, now half-burned, and vowed, silent and fierce, to hunt him down. The war wasn't over, it was personal now, and she'd bleed until he broke. LaToya Freeman stood in the smoking ruins of her Killeen home, ash swirling around her boots, the charred skeleton of her life crumbling under a grey Texas dawn. The explosion had gutted everything, photos of her with Jalen and Maya, her fathers, old army cap, decades of medals now melted slag. Her shoulder throbbed, blood seeping through the torn bandage from the sniper's graze, but she barely felt it, her eyes locked on the note pinned to the mailbox. "You'll never outrank me." Carver's taunt, scrawled in red, mocked her from beyond his escape, a jailbreak staged by a rogue deputy during the sheriff's riot. Colonel Pierce paced beside her, radio crackling with MP chatter. Suspects in the wind, his face etched with fury. "He's gone, LaToya. We'll hunt him." She shook her head, voice steel. "Not without me." This was her war now, and she'd end it herself. She climbed into the Humvee, Pierce protesting, "You're hurt, General," but she floored it, tires spinning gravel, heading for an old airfield 10 miles west, a hunch from Jalen's stories of shady deals he'd overheard at his shop. Carver was a coward, predictable in his spite, and she'd lure him out. She stopped at Fort Hood's armory, grabbing a burner phone and a vest, her shoulder screaming as she strapped it on. MPs saluted, hesitant, but didn't stop her. Reinstated rank a shield they couldn't breach. She called Pierce. "Set up a perimeter at Grayson Field. Leak, I'm there, alone. He'll come." He cursed. "That's suicide." But she hung up, driving into the dusk, the airfield's rusted hangars looming like tombs. She parked near a crumbling tower, rigging the burner to stream live on X, its camera propped on a crate, capturing the empty runway stretching into shadow. "Carver," she said into it, voice steady, "you want me? I'm here. No backup, no tricks. Finish what you started." She posted the link. Darkinka Freeman stands, trending fast, millions tuning in, breath held as she stepped into the open, vest. Tight, hands empty but fists clenched. The bait was set, her blood a beacon, and she waited. Wind whistling through the weeds, her shoulder leaking red down her arm. Headlights flared an hour later, a black SUV rolling slow, dust kicking up, and Carver emerged, alone, his buzz cut. Glinting, a Glock in hand, grin wide as a jackal's. "Knew you'd bite, Princess," he called, voice thick with glee, stepping closer. Gun raised. Latoya stood her ground, 10 yards between them, the cam rolling, ex-viewers spiking into the tens of millions. "You're a dead man walking," she said, eyes locked on his, letting him talk, his ego her weapon. "Dead?" he laughed, waving the Glock. "I burned your house, broke your brother, took your kid. I'm untouchable. Sheriff's out, my boys run this state. You're nothing." His rants poured out, slurs and venom. Black bitch thinks she's a soldier. Every word damning him live, the nation watching his unmasked hate. She edged closer, 5 yards now, voice low. "You're a coward who hides behind bombs." He snarled, lunging, and she moved, ducking his wild swing, slamming her good fist into his jaw, bone crunching as he staggered. The fight was brutal, raw, no guns, just flesh and rage. Carver swung the Glock's butt, clipping her temple, blood trickling warm down her cheek, but she grabbed his wrist, twisting until it snapped, the gun skidding across the tarmac. He roared, tackling her, his bulk pinning her, fists pounding, her ribs cracking bone. She gasped, pain exploding, but rolled, kneeing his groin, flipping him off. She stood, swaying, and kicked his face, teeth flying, blood spraying as he sprawled. "For Jalen," she hissed, stomping his chest. "For Maya." Another blow, his gasps wet and ragged. He clawed at her leg, spitting. "You'll never win." But she knelt, fists raining down, his nose shattering, eyes swelling shut until he lay still, groaning. Broken. MPs screeched up, lights flashing. Pierce leaping out. "Latoya!" as they cuffed Carver, his wrists limp, blood pooling under him. She stepped back, panting, vest torn, shoulder gushing, the cam catching every second, X erupting with "Carver down," cheers drowning his moans. Pierce grabbed her arm, steadying her. "You're insane, but it's over." Medics swarmed, patching her up, and she stood tall, uniform a shredded flag, watching Carver hauled off, his reign ash. Days later, the Pentagon called, voice awed. 4-star promotion, General Freeman. First black woman, history. She took it, head high. Visiting Tasha and Maya in the hospital, Jalen awake, weak but smiling, her family whole again. She thought it was done, justice hers. Carver locked tight, his rants a noose he'd tied himself. The nation chanted her name, protests flaring for reform, her face on every screen. But as she sat with Tasha, Maya whispered, "I'm joining the army, Auntie, to fight like you." Latoya's chest tightened, pride and dread mixing, knowing the war wasn't dead, just dormant. Pierce called later, voice grim. "Patriot sons are quiet, but chatter says they're in Congress, untouchable." She stared out the window, Killeen's scars fading into dusk, her promotion a crown on a battlefield still bleeding. Carver was down, but his roots ran deep, a system she'd chip at forever. Latoya Freeman stood at the Pentagon's podium, her new 4-star insignia glinting under harsh lights, her uniform pristine despite the scars beneath. Bandaged shoulder, bruised ribs, a temple still tender from Carver's blow. The room buzzed. Brass and reporters packed tight, cameras rolling as she faced a nation that had crowned her a hero. Her voice rang out, steady and sharp. "I've fought for this country 30 years, on battlefields abroad and streets at home. Carver's down, but his hate lives in systems we can't ignore. I'll dismantle it piece by piece until justice isn't a favor, but a right." The crowd held its breath, her words a blade cutting through decades of silence. Her blackness, a mirror to a country forced to look. She stepped back, head high, the first black woman 4-star general, a symbol forged in blood and fire. Applause erupted, slow then thunderous, her name a chant on X. Freeman rises, trending globally, millions saluting her steel. She exited the stage, boots echoing on marble, Colonel Pierce waiting in the corridor, his face grim but proud. "Hail shook them, Latoya," he said, clapping her shoulder, wincing as she flinched, the grays still raw. "They're listening now." She nodded, exhaustion seeping into her bones. Jalen's fragile recovery and Maya's fierce "I'll fight" looping in her mind. Tasha had hugged her tight at the hospital, whispering, "You're enough," and she'd clung to that, a lifeline after weeks of ash. Pierce handed her a classified file, thick and sealed. Fresh intel on Patriot Sons came up fast. She took it, brow furrowing, and broke the seal, flipping pages as they walked, her pulse ticking up with every line. The air thickened, a storm brewing she couldn't name yet. The file detailed Carver's death, found in his cell that morning, suicide, a belt around his neck, alone in max security. Latoya stopped, paper crumpling in her fist. He didn't kill himself, Pierce nodded. Coroner's report says strangulation, not self-inflicted. Bruises don't match. She scanned further, blood chilling. Rollins, the JAG traitor, had vanished from custody, no trace. Her cell empty hours before Carver's body turned cold. Chatter intercepted from Patriot Sons hinted at a cleanup. Loose ends tied, and a cryptic line. Pentagon call cleared the board. Latoya's breath caught. Her one call to Pierce, code Zulu Niner, flashing back. A distress signal she'd thought saved her. But what if it hadn't? She stormed Pierce's office, slamming the file down. "What did you do with my call?" He froze, eyes darting. "Sent MPs, got you out, you know that." She leaned in, voice a hiss. "And after? Who heard it?" He stammered. "Chain of command, JAG. Standard protocol." She grabbed his collar, shoving him against the wall. Someone flipped it. "Carver's dead. Rollins gone, and I'm the last one standing." "Explain." Pierce pushed back. "I didn't touch it, Latoya. You're paranoid." But her gut screamed otherwise, years of instinct honed in war zones, and she saw it. His flinch, the sweat beading on his brow, a crack in his stone. She released him, stepping back, mind racing, the file's words burning. Pentagon call cleared the board. She slipped out, dodging MPs, and hit a secure terminal in the basement, hacking in with codes from her Syria days, her fingers flying despite the ache in her shoulder. She pulled audio logs, her call to Pierce time-stamped, but a second transmission followed, encrypted, routed to an unknown line. She cracked it, heart pounding, and played it, her voice distorted. "Eliminate Carver Rollins clean slate," a fake stitched from her words, sent hours after her rescue. The recipient's ID was buried, but metadata pinged a congressional server, Patriot Sons roots deep in DC's halls. Her call hadn't just saved her. It had been twisted, a kill order she never gave, pinning her as the mastermind. Latoya sank against the wall, the terminal's hum a drone in her skull, pieces snapping into place. Someone, Pierce, Rollins, a shadow higher up, had used her distress to erase Carver's mess, framing her as the puppet pulling strings. X buzzed on her burner. General ordered hit. Trending, leaks spinning her into a warlord, her promotion a cover for blood. She'd fought racism, beaten Carver, saved Maya, but this was bigger. A chessboard where she was pawn and queen. She wiped the terminal, slipping into the night, uniform heavy, stars a lie on her shoulders. Tasha called, "What's happening?" And she whispered, "Stay safe, I'll fix this," hanging up before the sob broke free. She met Pierce at the hospital. Jalen's room dim, his breathing steady but weak, Maya asleep on Tasha's lap. "Truth," she said, voice ice, handing him the burner with the fake audio cued. He listened, face paling. "I didn't send this." She stared. "But you didn't stop it." He slumped. "I flagged it up, thought it was legit." "I'm sorry." She nodded, forgiveness a ghost she couldn't touch, and walked out, leaving him with his guilt. The Pentagon loomed in her mind, a fortress of secrets, and she vowed to climb it, expose the rot, her name a weapon they'd regret forging. Latoya stood on the hospital roof, Killeen's lights winking below, the file clutched tight, her uniform a shroud. Maya slipped beside her, quiet, saluting with a child's resolve. "You taught me well, Auntie." Latoya's chest cracked, pride and dread colliding, her niece's eyes cold, shaped by her war. She'd won, Carver dead, rank hers. But the twist gnawed, was she victim or shadow queen? The audio, the deaths, the congressional whisper, her call had sparked it, willingly or not, and the truth blurred, a moral fog she'd carry forever. She saluted back, silent, the horizon darkening, her fight far from over. This story of General Latoya Freeman unveils raw truths about resilience, systemic racism, and the cost of justice. First, it shows that strength isn't just physical. LaToya's unyielding spirit, honed by years of combat and prejudice, carried her through brutal racist attacks, from false arrests to bombings. She faced a system rigged against her, proving that courage can outlast oppression, even when it strikes at family and home. Second, it exposes how deeply racism festers, not just in individuals like Carver, but in institutions, sheriffs, JAG, even Congress, where power shields hate. LaToya's fight wasn't against one man, but a network that thrives in shadows. A lesson in vigilance against silent threats. Third, trust is a double-edged sword. Rollins's betrayal cut deeper than bullets, showing that allies can turn when greed whispers. Yet LaToya's choice to confront, not crumble, teaches that truth demands action, not surrender. Finally, the twist, her call twisted into a kill order, blurs the line between victim and victor, urging us to question justice's price. Is it worth the moral gray when the enemy's blood stains your hands? LaToya's story isn't a fairy tale. It's a mirror to a world where victories bleed and heroes bear scars. So what's your takeaway? Comment below. Do you think LaToya's fight proves justice prevails, or does the twist show it's always tainted? Hit like if her grit inspires you, subscribe for more real stories, and share to spark change. Thanks for joining this journey. Here's to strength and truth in every battle ahead.